Hello and a very warm welcome to The Real Talk. How are you doing? Thank you so much for making time to join us for this conversation. My name is Jackie Lumbasi. Please make use of the hashtag The Real Talk. Wherever you will leave that comment, a contribution, a question, we will find it and we will comment on it. We're live on RTV and on our official YouTube channel. Let's meet the guest. Thank you so much for joining us on yet another edition of The Real Talk. My guest today is Dr. Chizoba Imoka. Chizoba, I'll say Chizoba. We East Africans, okay, not even all the East African countries. Some East African countries will say Chizoba, others will say Chizoba. So when we go to West Africa, it's Chizoba. Yeah. Chizoba authored the book, Know Your Roots, Know Your Truth, Family Edition. And I hope that my colleague can zoom in so you see that beautiful cover. You know, I'm going to start by asking about this. Before we go down memory lane, where you're born and what sort of childhood you had, explain to me the cover of this beautiful book.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much, Jackie, for having me. It's
my
a pleasure.
Thank you for coming through.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here and to meet you in person again. This book, Know Your Roots, Know Your Truth, Family Edition, really is what the name says. The book was inspired, I think, by my experience as a Black woman, as an African woman, who grew up within a context where we were made to believe or made to think that following European or Eurocentric standards is superior and better for you in the long run. And so over the course of my life experiences, going to school, working, I was in a number of situations where, unfortunately, my internalized Eurocentric ideals didn't get me ahead. So, for example, I'm a teacher at the University of Toronto, and I'm in a place where other teachers should be, but I'm told that I shouldn't be here. In fact, I'm asked for an ID because of how I look.
You're going to tell me
I'll tell
details of such. I was really interested in the cover, the description of the cover, and I see a young boy who's hanging pictures of the family. Mm-hmm. And then we've got two ladies on the side. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we will get to the description later, but I'm really intrigued by the cover. Let's go back to, now you've given us a little bit of what inspired the book, so let's go back to your childhood. Where were you born? What sort of stories were being told around the dining table? What kind of family were you raised in?
Yes. So I was born in Lagos, Nigeria. Specifically, I grew up in a place called Oregon. So I grew up in Oregon, Ikeja, then lived in Adeni Jones, then eventually to Ikeja GRA. I grew up in a middle income home. So we grew up very comfortable. I didn't grow up thinking that I had a lot of needs. I didn't think I was rich. I didn't think we were filthy rich, but we didn't also have.
You didn't go without food. You did not run out of school fees. Some people would get chased back home.
Exactly.
Yes, that you never went through.
No, I didn't go through that. Yeah. My parents came from had a humble beginning. My dad was a young boy during the Civil War in Nigeria. So later on, I got to learn about what that meant for him. They grew up eating lizards, not having a lot of food to eat. So my father only had the opportunity to do his primary education, while my mom's father was in the military in Nigeria, so she also had memories of the war. So her parents hustled for her to at least get through secondary school. Okay. So these were two. So she was a custom officer for about 27 years before she retired, and my dad spent all of his life actually being an entrepreneur.
Okay, with his primary education,
with his primary education,
found a place, he found something to do.
So there's a popular there's a popular phase or program that young Igbo men go through. It's called Iba Boy. So it's essentially a mentorship program where you get to go apprentice with someone that has an established business. So that was what my father did. Wow. So he started off selling umbrellas. From there, he evolved. Yeah. So I grew up within a family context that I think the value of education and the aspiration for education was almost a way for my parents to feel validated or feel fulfilled.
I get it.
Since they didn't have the opportunity to do a lot of those things.
And was it education just in Nigeria, or they aspired to see you fly out of the country, go get this education somewhere else?
So wherever the best was, my dad said that was what he was living for. So, and my mom was very intentional about the places we were in, the schools we were going to. So I remember, you know, initially we lived in a one-bedroom apartment, but the schools we went to were schools that I guess people in one-bedroom apartment may not go to.
They'll be expensive schools.
Yeah, so my parents were dreamers. They had evolved to become people that wanted to do more than they had the chance to do while they were young people. So I'm the first daughter of four kids. So we're 3 girls and 1 boy. So I went to school in Nigeria. I did my up to my secondary school in Nigeria, and then I moved to Canada when I was 16. So I did my first degree there. I started off in a little village called Grand Prairie. Many people may not know that it's a tiny, tiny village. Whenever that comes up, people are like, what did you go to do in Grand Prairie? Grand Prairie is about 4 hours away from Edmonton.
How did you even end up there?
Exactly, different story. 4 hours away from Edmonton, so I did my first 2 years of college there. And then I did my final 2 years in Edmonton at the University of Alberta. And then I worked for the government in Alberta. I worked at the Office of Traffic Safety. And then I went back to Nigeria. So in between that period, I founded an organization called Unveiling Africa.
Unveiling Africa.
Yes, which was supposed to be a platform for young people to get involved in the development of Africa, even though we were far from home. But I'll tell you the story of that. But the other part of it was that I came to Canada to learn more about the issues on the continent than what I thought I should have learned when I was on the continent.
You know, because I wanted to ask
Yes,
that.
so I'll come back to that.
Please,
So after I worked with the government, between all of that, I founded this organization. And then I moved back to Nigeria. There's something called the youth service that we do.
I know it.
For a year, yes. So I went back to do that. I also worked in my dad's company at that point. I was running this organization. And I had come back to Nigeria thinking I was going to do an MBA. And while I was in Nigeria, my mentor, this amazing Auntie Shade, I call her Auntie Shade, she nudged me to say, you know, everything you're doing, talking about is all education. So what are you using an MBA for? So that was how I went into education. So I went back to Canada. I did my master's and my PhD at the University of Toronto. Yeah.
So when you went to Canada, you got a rude awakening.
Exactly.
You get in there, and that is when it really became clear to you that you're black, you're African, and it also occurred to you that you knew very little about you, your people, and your continent. Tell us about that.
Yes, so I moved to Canada when I was 16.
Just before it, I want to read something in the book. Your dedication says to the children of African heritage, whether on the continent, in the diaspora, or in the Caribbean.
100%.
You lumped us up all together.
Yes.
You always find strength in your roots, wisdom in your history, and courage in your journey.
Exactly.
May this book help you uncover the stories of those who came before you, embrace the richness of who you are, and inspire you to fly and flourish.
Exactly.
You're the legacy, you're the future, you are boundless.
Yes.
With love and hope. And then you're saying, so when you left home, and people would ask you questions like, where are you from? And you say, you're from Nigeria. But they didn't stop there. How come you speak such good English?
Exactly.
Somebody asked you that, and you got confused because we speak English in Nigeria.
Exactly. Exactly.
Many of us grew up speaking it as if it was our first or only language.
100%.
So let's talk about that experience.
100%. And that connects back to the name of this book.
Yes.
Because many of us, I grew up having English as the dominant thing. I picked up Igbo only because people were speaking Igbo around me. And I think a lot of the people in my parents' generation, especially having gone through the civil war in Nigeria, the civil war and the story of the civil war feels like baggage to them. So to succeed, they feel like they have to forget about all of those things. So, so I was really shocked by this question because my entire reality had been English. Yep. You know, if I engaged with Igbo, it was by the side. I mean, we went to the village for Christmas. But the center of our life was really Eurocentric ideals. Yes. So I'm like, okay, now I get to Canada and people are, first of all, shocked. They're shocked. They want to know if our skin, if there's color. Yes. You know, people are wondering about how come you speak such good English. And I'm like, what do you mean speak such good English? Yeah. English is all I've known all my life, yes. You know. So I got a number of those questions. And initially I was like, okay, where's this coming from? And then on the other side, you meet young people who have a lot of I don't know, youthful energy about wanting to help Africa. Yeah. And at that point, I'm like, okay, what is wrong with Africa? Yes. And you know, and the help is to the level of we're bringing $5, we're contributing $10.
And you know, in your community, during growing up in Lagos and the kind of family that you grew up in, you didn't think there was a family within the community that needed $5 worth of help?
No, I didn't think we had serious issues. Yeah, needs. Like there wasn't, maybe now in retrospect, there was no critical consciousness. You know, things where we just did things, we went through the motion, right? And school was really just about passing through. Yes. So it wasn't the purpose of schooling, the purpose of education, and the critical role each young person would play as a result of the education they've received wasn't something that was apparent. So even the issues, the problem Nigeria had or has, the problem Africa has, we didn't really understand it. Many of us, the consciousness that we had was really about Nigeria from independence. But why did we even have to be in a situation where we had to pursue independence? That wasn't something that we critically understood, right? Even the Biafran War became a reality and a lived truth to me when I was doing my PhD.
When you're doing your PhD.
Exactly. So
something that your parents lived.
Exactly. I had to call my father at that point to ask, what's this about? That's when I started to hear these stories. So go back to the young people in Canada that I had met. So they clearly were exposed to a certain narrative about Africa and what was wrong in Africa from a certain perspective. That was charity, let's save them, you know, and maybe really from a moralistic point of view. There are young people that are hungry, we need to help them, you need to save them. Also no critical context for them. So me then coming from my comfortable middle class background, and I'm like wondering, I'm like, okay, and I even had a situation where my friend's husband offered to donate $20 to my school fees. Because of his own perception of who Africans are. Yeah. So anyways, all of that made me realize that, okay, number one, there's information gap. Yeah. But number two, there's information gap for the Canadians I was meeting, but even for us as Africans, there's something that we're growing up not understanding and not learning. So until I went to Edmonton to finish my degree, that I took an African history class. God. And when I took that African history class, I guess that was the first encounter I had with what it means to learn about African history from an African-centered perspective.
How much about Africa did you know before you went to Canada?
I don't know.
Which African countries did you know? Because for me in East Africa, I know a lot about West Africa.
Yeah, no.
We are taught that in school.
No, we didn't have that. You
guys are confined with
maybe because there's the narrative of, Nigeria, giant of Africa. There wasn't that much of a consciousness, the way that I know now, that say my son has. but there wasn't that much of a consciousness of Africa. And even during my master's dissertation, I went to African Leadership Academy. That was where I did my research. Some of the young people I met there who were reflecting on their experiences in this school told me that when they came to the school, they couldn't place African countries on the map.
Oh, man.
And that was, I felt that this is my story. She said she struggled to put...
And these are fellow Africans?
Yeah, these are fellow Africans. So this was in 2014, I'm talking here. Yeah. So she said she couldn't, so that was when she realized that there was something wrong.
I feel really bad, exactly. There is something wrong.
There's something wrong.
We guys were beaten in school to place African countries on the map.
we didn't.
You didn't go through that.
No, we didn't go through that. We didn't go through that. So so it was in Canada that I literally started to understand that, look, there's something wrong in the way that I've come to understand myself, understand my country, understand my continent. And then I would meet black people that were not from Africa.
From Africa, yeah.
I'm like, okay,
you also exist?
What's going on here? So the idea of Jamaicans, Trinidadians, all of us looking the same.
Haitians.
Yeah. You know, and then there are black people in India, there are black people in Sri Lanka. I'm like, what is going on here? So clearly the education that it looked like we were receiving, at least maybe on the West African side, was almost intended to perpetuate divisions.
That's right.
Amongst the black people.
Black people.
So it was when, through the relationships I started to nurture, I started to learn that, oh, wow, it was because of the enslavement of Africans that the Jamaicans are now in a place called Jamaica, that the Trinidadians are now in a place called Trinidad. Meanwhile, a lot of their practices are very similar to ours here. Yet, when a white supremacist sees me or sees a black boy on the street, they don't know the difference. They don't know whether I'm Kenyan, they don't know whether I'm Nigerian, they don't know whether I'm Jamaican, they don't know whether I'm from Grenada. All they know is that you're black.
Yeah.
So that's why in this book, I talk about the need for us, whether you're black in Africa, you're black in Nigeria, or you're black in diaspora or in the Caribbean, all of us are one.
Talk about the step you took after that.
Yes. So after that, a number of things, right? So I started with this Unveiling Africa initiative that provided a platform for Africans to start to come together, to learn about themselves, but also to come as a collective to show leadership in how we're solving our own problems. So instead of us waiting to be invited by, the white nice person, that is doing Make Poverty History, how about we take charge of our narrative? How about we take charge of showing that, look, we're not all people jumping off from trees, because that was a predominant conception. That's why people were so amazed that you speak English, because in their mind,
if you're living in the forest,
exactly. You're waiting to be saved. You're not this civilized. Oh my God, they're really amazed at the level of finesse that you have. So being able to just dispel and make it normal that excellence is not just something that is obtained amongst white Canadians or amongst white Americans. So Unveiling Africa provided that platform. And then I remember then there were issues on the continent. There was the genocide in Darfur. So as young people, we came together to raise money to contribute to Darfur. We contributed to the International Rescue Committee many years ago. So those were the kinds of things I started to do. And then after that, I realized that, look, it might be too late to wait until people come to university to address the issue of us not being able to take ownership of the future of the continent. So I thought, you know what, I need to go back to secondary school.
We need to start early.
Yes, we need to start earlier. So then during my youth service year, I was back in Nigeria focusing on teenagers. So with teenagers,
what did you do with them?
Oh, I had an essay contest. So one of the essay contests was on the role of Nigerian teenagers in Nigeria's development. I wanted them to reflect on that. And then Nigeria at 60, what is your dream for that? So we did that. We had a conference, and I started working with young people to publish magazines, like a youth-led magazine. Started doing innovation contests amongst them. I started challenging young people, whether you're rich, whether you're poor. So far, you have a name, you have a place, you have a talent. There's something you can do. So there was a particular group of young people from a school called Yaba College of Technology. They forfeited their lunch for about a month. And they raised all of that money to buy a bus for another group of young people in a home for people with disability.
Wow.
Yes. So these were the kinds of, so this idea of youths, and youths not thinking they're leaders of tomorrow, but being leaders of today.
And what that illustrates is we do not have, as you said even earlier, we don't have to sit somewhere waiting to be saved.
Exactly.
These are initiatives that we can do on our own, and with the little that we have. Start where you are with what you have.
Yes. So, and I think looking at my own experience, and you know, after I started to reflect on my privilege, and you know, even though my parents came from humble beginnings, but then I had the opportunity to do the things they couldn't do. So then I started to ask myself, well, if my parents were able to get me this far with the little they had, what then must I be able to do with all the privilege that I now have? So this is the same question that I was interested in posing to young people as well. That look at how far we've come. The people that got the independence for us in Africa were all young people as well. So what can you do? You can do something. Just think, what can you do? So, so that's kind of, you know, that actually spurred me on to doing my PhD. I became very interested in how do I then support young people not at the sideline? Because while I did all of the things that I did in Nigeria, it was clear that it was almost an afterthought. Right? So it's an essay contest you do as an afterthought. You know, it's an optional thing. The question then became, if this is so important, why shouldn't this be integrated into the entire schooling experience of a young person? To think about leadership, to think about personal responsibility for transforming Nigeria, for transforming Africa. So that was how I got into education. You know,
I just sit here quietly, I'm thinking, it feels like it's going to be an uphill task. Because the more educated we get, the more exposed and developed, the farther away we move from what should be cherished as our own. How will you,
that's another part.
How are you going to deal with that?
Yes.
Really, our parents wanted us to go slightly higher than where they were. Then we want our children to never go through what we went through. And the far away we'll get them from our history and our education and our misery, the better for us.
Yes. So, and that's a good question, a reminder that you've brought in, because in my own case, as I navigated the journey of education in Canada, I became very interested in being able to help in my village, right? Because it was clear that people in the village, at least when I compared my Lagos life to my village life, people in the village needed the most help. But what I found alarming was that even though I now had a master's, but when I go to my village, I want to talk to my grandfather, I couldn't communicate. So that was one of the contradictions I started to realize, that why is it that what it means to be educated for me as an Igbo woman, as a Nigerian, as an African, is to be unplugged
from people.
From the core.
From the core, be disconnected from your grandfather.
So Papa, even though I understood Igbo, but Papa's Igbo was a bit more dense. And I could tell that Papa was a very intelligent man. He was a blacksmith. He made instruments. During the war, he made things that people used. So I wanted to be able to learn from Papa. I wanted to understand how do you, and I think with my education in Canada, I had come to understand the idea of people-centered development. So people-centered development means you put the people at the center. In fact, the people have to be the ones that narrate their problem, and through them and having them in front driving that ship, they develop the solutions.
That's right.
So, but then how is it that, in trying to facilitate that, there is no language?
Yeah.
But more so,
we're taking the people.
Yeah, but more so, what is even understood as development is not anything related to what is in the villages.
Let's come to that. The definition of development.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on The Real Talk. It's always a pleasure having your company. My guest is Dr. Chizoba. Beautiful story. She authored the book, Know Your Roots, Know Your Truth, Family Edition. And we'll get to hear more about this book. What you have now is the preamble. Where does that come from? Because by the time somebody pours their heart out like this, it's not 2 pages, it's not 3 pages. By the time they pour their heart out like into something like this, it's because they've lived through a certain experience that led them feel like, let me have it in a book, that it's transferred to other people, and it will transform generations. We'll take a break shortly. We will be back. Welcome back. This is The Real Talk. Know your roots, know your truth. Chizoba, let's talk about that realization, the development that we keep talking about. What was the reality in the village?
Yeah. So I mean, with my grandfather, it was I wanted to simply understand, how did you grow up?
Yeah.
You know, why did you, and the other thing about my grandfather was that he helped set up about 3 churches in Nigeria. But at some point, my grandfather decided to leave the church and said he was going to follow the ways of the land. We call it Omenani. So I was, first of all, very curious about why would he do that, because Igbos are very religious people, and my family is very religious as well. But my grandfather was so defiant about this conviction to not be a part of the church.
But this is after he had been a part of it for a while.
Exactly.
Or did he decide this white man's
I don't know. I don't know. So that was why, in trying to engage and understand him more, I realized how, while I have been educated, my education just doesn't translate to much value to my grandfather because we can't communicate. Right? So that's one of the things I started trying to understand. That, okay, how then can you say that I'm educated if my education makes me more palatable to people that are not from where I come from? When I go to Canada, people can relate to me, they feel comfortable around me. And for many blacks, that's part of the issues we have. You don't quite fit in. But, I mean, you're palatable to an extent until maybe you want something more. And then you're reminded, where are you from? You know, and then when you go home, you still cannot fit in as well. So I think in all of this, I realized that, look, I can never be who I'm not. Nobody, a chicken can never, no matter how you aspire to be a lion.
A chicken can never be a lion. Never.
The chicken can be the best version chickens can possibly be. So it feels that the education we're receiving was trying to make us become who we're not. So
and who will never become.
And who we will never become. And you will never still be accepted. Right? So I don't know if Oprah Winfrey, there was a time, it was all over the media that she wanted to buy a bag in Paris and they told her she couldn't afford it. Because she was just, whoever told her that didn't realize she was Oprah.
Yeah.
She just looked like a black woman to her. So for me, I think I came to the realization that, look, the kind of world we need is a world where we all don't have to be the same. We should be seen as equal and different. But our education tries to create...
I think it's an education problem.
Yes, our education, not only the education, but I think our general socialization almost tries to scrub out that villageness from you. you know, norms, values, ways of seeing things are put on a hierarchy. So the Eurocentric norms, eating with a fork, you know, speaking a certain way, is seen to be superior.
That becomes cool.
That becomes the cool thing,
cool thing,
the cool way of being. And then the others, and in Nigeria, remember we had a term, like people that had an accent, they are called Raz, like your bush, right? And so we say that to ourselves, but these are internalized norms that we've picked up, and then we hear of people that are punished for speaking their language. In fact, many of our history was taken out of the curriculum in Nigeria, right? So we need to, so I think the real deal, or what we need to realize now, is that we are better off as a society, or as a global society, where difference is rewarded and not punished.
But then you see, I think that is easier said than done. And I want to imagine you do not want to take us back to those days when our forefathers wore back clothes or whatever. You're not trying to take us back there. But when it comes to the socialization and the education, we talk about a global village. We consume technology that it's not born and bred in Africa. How do we exist with the rest of the world if you want us to go back to speaking Igbo and being proud of it, and yet I've gone to Harvard, I will need a sponsor from somewhere there. Even if I come back to do something within my village, some initiative, I still have to be the white-collar Jackie to attract that funding. Somebody in the village who has not traveled anywhere out of their community, who does not speak another language apart from their mother tongue, gets very little from this world. Gets very little. The reason we do all these things is because it's the only way to get slightly more. You know, I'm looking for a question that I do not even know how to phrase.
And that's but
I'm sure you get the frustration.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I think the problem is that the vision of success that we have, especially within the African continent, often precludes our ways of knowing, right? So for you to be seen as educated in, say, Nigeria or even in Kenya, why does it only have to be being competent in English and maths? Why can't it be, you know English, you know Igbo, you know Kikuyu? So I don't know if it's part of the colonial legacy, I think it is, that has created the either, it's an or, you can't have both. So this is not, I mean, I think it's a different conversation about whether we want to go back to sack clothing and all of that, but I think this is about us being rooted global citizens. For us to have a rich global society, we need to have people that are connected to the things that make them truly and uniquely who they are. And their knowledge systems, their origin stories, the proverbs, the riddles, those are things, in all of those things, there is knowledge, there's ways of understanding.
We don't have story time anymore. We don't have the riddles anymore.
So to my point, going to Harvard would be much richer if I showed up in Harvard as a young woman that is well immersed, well connected, well engaged to the richness of my Igbo heritage in relation to the Nigerian heritage, in relation to my my African heritage.
You still would need to have been beaten to learn the language, eh?
So you shouldn't
you will need to be beaten for you to master that language.
Yeah, but you shouldn't have to. Because so what then happens is that we think the measure of success or the expectation going to Harvard is that you have to give up, delete all of your Igbo-ness, delete all of your Kikuyu-ness, speak in a certain way.
But then you won't go there, Chizoba, speaking your mother tongue.
But you can speak knowing how to speak your mother tongue and knowing how to speak English, those are not mutually exclusive. They don't have to be. They don't have to be. And
but we're told practice makes perfect. The reason we're being beaten and the reason we'd have to leave the Kikuyu or the Kinyarwanda is because can you use this time to master this? Because in future you're going to a place where that Kikuyu
and
or
thankfully,
Kinyarwanda will
research
not
has shown that, in fact, for people to learn English, there was a study done, I think, in 1967 in Nigeria. It was shown, they did an experiment. Young people that learned English using their mother tongue versus young people that learned English using English, the young people that learned through their mother tongue did better.
So mother tongue
yes,
always remains the number
yeah,
one language.
so especially for people that grew up in homogeneous communities. I think in urban spaces a bit different, right? But if you grow up in a village, ideally, because in China, for example, you're learning in Chinese and the knowledge and the magic and the unique things about the Chinese context is being passed on to the young Chinese person, right? And they are now able to learn English.
But then there are billions.
Then there are billions. So we need to be able to, I think first of all, we need to become a people where our culture is not a transactional thing for us. Because now we're in a situation where we feel like, we need
sacrifice.
If we don't know this English, how are we going to pay our bills? How are we going to do this? So I understand that. That is, we need to solve our immediate problem. But that will not get us far. That will not get us far. We need to get to a situation where we're able to empower our young people to be able to plug into the mindsets, to the knowledge system, to the ways of understanding that our ancestors had. Except we're saying that our ancestors knew nothing. Except that's what we're saying.
Yeah, and yet we know that they
exactly. So before white people came, we were eating, we were, our dogs were being healed, we were giving birth.
Yeah.
So we had things like it's from us that there's Ubuntu philosophy. So there's certainly something incredibly rich.
Yeah, we come from a very rich
heritage. So how are we equipping ourselves to connect to that heritage for us to be able to enrich a global society that is more sustainable, more resilient, and better able to serve the diverse needs of the people that make it up?
Tell us about the book.
Yes.
And what role?
Yes.
Looking at the bigger picture, what is this book going to play?
Amen.
Yeah.
So this book is really about doing what I've just described, helping us. And it looks like a children's book, but it's really a family book. It's a book that adults can use as well, because I think the way we've been socialized, we've learned to strip ourselves off of memories that really at the core makes us who we are. So it's a family book that allows, it's a practical book actually, it's a workbook.
It's a
workbook.
Yes.
It provides reflection prompts in different places that allows people to understand the importance of being rooted first of all. And in the book, there's an analogy using a tree. A tree without roots doesn't stand. So a person without roots, you won't stand. You might be high flying, you get all the accolades, but at some point, you will still be carded. You will still be told you don't belong. But even when you're told that, there are certain things that shield you. When you know who you are, you know you come from a loving place. You know that people that look like you were intentional. There are certain things that won't move you. Right?
You won't be shaken.
You won't be shaken. Yes, things happen. But you know who you are. And I'm reminded of Chimamanda. I think she was having an interview with Trevor Noah. And she talked about, I think Trevor Noah was asking her something about how she responds to critics. And she, essentially she had said that she made reference to her family, that she grew up in a loving home, while she goes around trying to learn new things, but she will never go around campaigning for people's love.
Because she got enough of that.
Because she has
enough of it where she's coming from.
Yeah, so she doesn't have to be liked by everybody. So it takes a certain level of grounding, right, to own your convictions, to own your what I know for sure, and say, you know what, you don't have to like it. We can agree to disagree. But I also have seen a version of myself that cared a lot about what other people think or what this person would say, versus when you now evolve to a certain grounding that knows that, you know what,
This is me.
I'm not lollipop, I'm not ice cream, I'm not jollof rice, I'm not nyamachoma, I'm not isombe. You all don't have to like me.
You don't have to,
I'm a buffet. You can take what you like.
And leave the other.
And leave the other. There is fridge to put whatever. You know, so this is really about us owning our space in the world. And I don't think you can own that space in the world without knowing where you're coming from. And here, you know, while my initial pain point was on the absence of African-centered history in our education, in our socialization, in the things in our churches, in the road signs we see, I realized that African history is made up of Africans. So what is African history? African history is a combination of my history as an African, your history as an African. Is made up of our individual family histories. And also, remember I told you that we Nigerians, and I think also maybe other Africans and Caribbeans to different degrees, the history that we mostly learn is from the perspective of the colonizer. In some cases, there is a silence on other histories prior to the colonizer's encounter with us. So I'm talking about the enslavement of Africans. I'm talking about pre-colonial history. So this book seeks to also awaken silenced histories, but through an easy entry point by getting young people who was great-grandpa's great-grandpa. That enables conversations about times that we may not have grown up talking about, pre-colonial history. So the book, at the core of it, provides a whole bunch of questions for young people, for adults that feel like they've grown up without really knowing who they are, especially people in diaspora, being able to understand, how do we do things where I come from? What name did my grandparents have?
Where did my name come from?
Where did my name come from? What kind of work did they do? What are the values that they have? What are the no-nos in our family? Where were we during the enslavement of Africans? What role did we play? What worldview do we have? What religions did we practice? So this then allows you to have almost like a briefcase of tools that you know it is yours, right? But I think the other part of this book also seeks to help people to understand that, look, no matter what you want to say about our African culture, you can never be, if you take all of another person's culture, it's still not yours. So we must start from where we are. And we have a lot to work on. We have a lot to build from. But for you to even continue to reinvent our society, to reinvent our culture, you need to know what you have.
So this book says family edition.
Exactly.
Tell me why it's family edition. Doesn't mean we're looking forward to other editions.
Yes.
But also, what's the definition of family?
Okay.
Is it just the nuclear family? Is it the extended family? But also, family today is diverse. There's
exactly.
like hybrid, blended
families. Yeah.
And then it's a book, hard copy. Are we going to get this in other forms?
Okay.
Because now we are learning in many different ways. We are keeping these things in digital forms. Do you appreciate that as an African way of storing information? Or are you going to insist on this?
Okay, good question. So, Know Your Roots, Know Your Truth is a series. The first is family. The second is on place of origin.
A place of origin.
Yes. And the third is on ways of the land.
Ways of the land.
And these trio, I think they're a powerful combination to help people to begin, right? So Family Edition focuses on your personal story, your family history across the enslavement, across independence, across pre-colonial times, and then hopefully with the help of an adult or a teacher or within a broader community, you can start to reflect on how that personal history connects to the broader history. And then place of origin. So where do you come from? Where you come from, what's the significance of the plants there? Are there some plants that are significant? If so, why? Why are there valleys? Are there mountains? Is there a river? Is there a story behind it?
Why do we cook the way we do cook?
Why do we cook the way we cook? Why do we do XY on XY day?
Yes.
Like I know when my grandfather died, because he didn't go to church, he wasn't a part of the church, they couldn't bury on the market day.
You see? Yep.
Just nothing you would do. You can't bury on the market day. Our market day was on Kwo.
In my community, if a man dies and he was of circumcision age, he dies before being circumcised, they will circumcise him before they bury him.
So why?
Why?
And then I remember, you know, growing up when I think it was England we went to, there's a hop on hop off bus. And I started to think about imagine all the little details you get about, you know, this street in London. And I always wonder, how come I am not able to tell anybody a deep, nuanced, interesting story about where I come from?
Yeah.
I should be able to make a business out of that.
Yes.
So that place of origin is intended to equip people with deep, nuanced, interesting knowledge about where we come from and the significance and the stories behind it and the opportunities embedded in those places. And even when you think of it as a pathway to strengthen livelihoods for young people, for you to be able to create other forms of livelihood, you need knowledge first. You need to know what is here. Where is this place called here?
Yes. And this knowledge is really important before we get to the other knowledge.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then the last on ways of the land is about the whys. What is our local biology? What is our local physics? What is our local chemistry? We have 4 days of the week in Igbo worldview. There are only 4 days of the week. There's a story about how those 4 days came to be.
Wow. Wow.
So even I know in Igbo land, when you're having an event, there are people that stop the rain.
The rainmakers.
The rainmakers.
We have them in my community as well.
So what is that? That must
What's
be
the magic? How do they do that?
That must be physics.
That's physics.
Exactly.
Right there. Exactly.
So how is and that physics doesn't get into the classroom. It's not seen as standard knowledge.
But also, it's also knowledge that will not be shared with everyone because these people want to.
I don't think we've asked.
There's a community that remains as the rainmaker community.
I don't think we've asked. And maybe we're hostile. Maybe they're afraid that we're going to hijack.
Because I think the other thing, Chizoba, is as Africans, there's so much that we look at as taboo. So you will not be told this knowledge will not be shared with you because it's a preserve of that community, it's a preserve of that age. So if we are denying ourselves this because we think if we say this, then there'll be a curse meted on the family.
Well, I mean, I do think...
As we conclude.
Yeah, I do think
that... I tackle that as we conclude, and we'll have you back here.
Yeah. No, I do think that we need to have more conversations about how do we mainstream our indigenous knowledge. Because for me, our indigenous knowledge and our indigenous ways of being and our histories and our stories is what makes us unique. And no society, and what makes you unique is your comparative advantage. And everybody operates on their comparative advantage.
No doubt, yeah.
So how are we equipping ourselves to familiarize ourselves more with our comparative advantage?
Yeah. It's not something we should lose.
We shouldn't lose it. Not for anything.
Where do we find this book? How does one land on it?
Yes. So we have a website, knowmyroots.com is the website. On the website, there's a whole bunch of places you can find the book. It's on Amazon as well. It's at Ikirezi.
The library,
No, not the library, the bookstore.
Oh, sorry,
the bookstore. You can.
It has a reading.
Yeah, you can find it at Total Care. You can find it at the airport as well. And then on the website, you can also order it. There are phone numbers there.
Yeah.
For people in Rwanda, yes, the book is everywhere. In Nigeria,
Okay.
it's also available and on Amazon as well. Yeah.
Good. If the viewer is to forget anything that you've said here, what is that message you want them to keep?
Your roots is your power.
Your roots.
Is your power.
Yes.
Yes. And I do understand. I know you asked about family. I do understand within the Rwandan context, family is touchy. You know, there is, because of the history of the genocide against the Tutsis. So I do think that needs to be acknowledged. In the book, we acknowledge that not every family
is diverse. Yeah,
families are diverse. Not every family is intact for different reasons. That's okay.
Yeah.
Wherever we are is a good place to start.
Great.
Even if it's a story, whatever, and we've seen Rwanda, like the story, Rwanda's emergence and the admiration people have for Rwanda is because of everything Rwanda has become in spite of where it began. So I think for me, taking that on a personal level as well, is that however your family is, whatever that story is, that's a good place to build from.
Yeah.
That's a good place to build from. We acknowledge it, you take your time, and you build from there.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you.
This was beautiful. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. For me, it's been a pleasure having Dr. Chizoba on the show, and we'll have her back. There's so much we could have tackled, but you know, time constraints. But no worries, she's around, and she'll always say yes, I assure you. So we'll have her back. I hope that you've learned something from this conversation. You take care. We'll see you next week. God bless you.